Hello, everyone. This is Leslie Powers, and I'm really happy to be here at SEED5 Metamorphosis Conference. My website is alivethrive.life. The title of my presentation is Reviving Sophia, the Feminine Journey to Reclaiming Ourselves and the World. Let's begin. Sophia, from the Greek Sophia, skill, knowledge of, acquaintance with, sound judgment, practical wisdom, cunning shrewdness, philosophy, also wisdom personified. Sophia in Gnosticism is a feminine figure analogous to the human soul, but also simultaneously one of the feminine aspects of God. Through her human experiences of both joy and suffering, matter and soul become united into existence. She is one of the many names of the divine feminine. Her journey is dynamic and often tumultuous. Falling into physical reality, forgetting her true origins, she often walks right into trouble. Rarely walking a straight line, she swirls and spirals like deep ocean water, sometimes like the raging rivers, and often like the peaceful pond or lake. To ascend into her true nature, she must remember that she is made of spirit. And this means that she must walk through her fear and step courageously into her pain. And then find and befriend her disconnected parts, scattered and split from painful experiences and a world that doesn't allow her true expression. Through embodied experiences with all things felt and a knowledge of her spiritual nature, Sophia reintegrates and becomes a higher version of herself. James Hillman said, "She is the Sophia of wisdom, the Maria of compassion, the Persephone of destruction, compelling necessity and fate, and the muse." Shakti has two faces, one of absolute unity, and the other consisting of billions of diverse realities. In involution, she hides the first face in order to reveal the second. The many faces of Sophia on our spiral path of transformation. She is everything. I'm going to start with the story and then share several more. The first story I'll share is the myth of Sophia. This version is from an article titled "The World's Soul is a Woman, the Gnostic Myth of Sophia" by Robert Kopecky. In the Gnostic myth of how the world works, Sophia, the feminine personification of wisdom, lives happily with the spirits of light, including her twin brother, in the unified, limitless potential of her father's radiance. She's so dizzy with love for the creative source that when she sees a brilliant shimmering light below, she flings herself down into the darkness, mistakenly following what she believes to be her father's radiance, fooled by a mere reflection. There, in the abysmal, unrealized potential of the world, she is trapped, separated from the light, the spiritual realization of gnosis, the knowledge of transcendent unity. There in the underworld, in material form, the powers of the underworld have their way with her, using, abusing, and exploiting her, until all she knows is sadness in the struggle to return herself up to the light she has lost but not forgotten. She gives birth to a bunch of bad boys, demigods called archons, including the worst of them all, the demiurge, who becomes the creator of this world, infecting it with pride, ignorance, fear, and his lust for power and pleasure. But Sophia remains present, and in her resurgent power, she brings great beauty and spiritual potential to the earthly realm and its inhabitants, witnessing the irresponsible creation of the world by her errant offspring. Sophia conceals consciousness in the body of the demiurge's first man, Adam, and then brings it into the world as Eve. Finally, Sophia breaks free and ascends back up to the true light of life, raising humanity with her ever so slightly. But she refuses to abandon the sad world of humans, and so she divides herself, keeping a part below, ever present and available for the enlightenment of all. And back, safe and sound in the celestial realm of spiritual light, Sophia discovers gnosis by joining her twin brother in a marriage of reunification, balancing the masculine ego of unrealized potential and uniting it with the sacred feminine, made even more powerful by adversity, for she is changed after her journey, a complete person, full with the knowledge of the transcendent, unified light. This path can lead us to self-realization and an understanding of the feminine heart and soul of the earth. For it is only in the feminine, the channel of creation into the world, that humanity finds the power and the compassion necessary to overcome the darkness of ignorance. The figure of Sophia is equivalent to Mahashakti of the Vedic and Tantric philosophy. She is the goddess of everything, divine feminine power. She is the innate power in reality, the power to be conscious, the power to feel ecstasy or pain, the power of will and desire, the power to know, and the power to act. Shakti takes form as the biological processes of our body. She acts through our thoughts and the interplay of our emotions. We are all made of Shakti. She is a force that moves us toward the evolution of our consciousness, with which we must align when we seek conscious transformation. Shiva, Shakti live in eternal union, like Sophia and Christ. Shiva, the male counterpoint, the masculine energy, and Shakti, the feminine, and together they are everything. Shiva is the great awareness, and he encompasses everything. Shakti, the formless source of everything, can take form, personifications of the different energies that make up the multiple dimensions of existence and of our own consciousness. She is responsiveness. She is dynamic energy. And this information I gleaned from Awakening Shakti, a book by Sally Kempton. In Awakening Shakti, Sally quotes, "True power arises from an inner feminine source, from Shakti. Shiva is the inner masculine and is the source of consciousness or awareness. We need the stability of linear focus, the masculine quality, to merge with the feminine quality of energy. But in order to act, to stir, he must take energy from the inner feminine. He is the one that is goal-focused, while she is the energy that drives his action." There is a theme of separation versus unity that suggests that this is all about a relational dynamic. And when we talk about the feminine, very much so, it involves relationships, relationships to ourself, relationship to each other, relationship to the world, relationship to information, relationship to nature. From Awakening Shakti. The Tantric sages often say that Shakti has two faces, one of absolute unity and the other consisting of billions of diverse realities. In involution, she hides the first face in order to reveal the second. Later, she will dissolve all these forms back into herself and reveal her face of unity. But now, stage by stage, she takes on increasingly dense forms. And what are the two faces of the goddess? One, the face of separation. Shakti creates the experience of radical separation, manifesting as the compelling diversity of our inner and outer world. She blinds us to the basic unity of life. Her second face is that of grace. Because it is Shakti that has created the illusion of separation, Shakti has to free us from it. We need the grace of the one from whose energy it was made. And Shiva remains outside and beyond all this, the unchanging knower, the witness, awareness that both observes and contains the dance. At every level of consciousness, the masculine and the feminine, Shiva and Shakti, steadiness and dynamism, awareness and bliss, stability and transformation, being and becoming, complete and complement each other. Here we recognize the goddess is in everything And this will help us to pop out of our trap of polarity. We are not just matter, and we are not just spirit. We are everything, and here we find peace. Healing ultimately comes from the integration of all our parts, the integration of the masculine and feminine, the integration of the steady and the dynamic. To integrate it requires an attitude of curious acceptance and calm understanding. From this place where unconditional love presides, those wounded expressions will settle down and transform. There are uncountable goddesses in the mythologies from around the world that echo universal themes, including the story of falling from grace and descending into the underworld before rising back up into wholeness or embodied wisdom. The bigger-than-life goddess personas are beacons of knowledge about aspects and potentials of ourselves. They demonstrate the warnings of how we can devolve and the wisdom of how to evolve, the wisdom of how to create unity or how to separate. And with every form we take, there is an impact on the world and a consequence. The vicissitudes of life and death, with its many hardships, help shape who we are. We fall into heartache, depression, anxiety, shame, isolation, loneliness, confusion, addictions, resentments, immobility, self-condemnation, cruelty, addictions, and insanity. These hardships often catch us off guard and spiral us into personal crises. These events serve as opportunities or initiations with the potential to propel us back up into wholeness, complete with our new wisdom. With courage, we can face our darkness, and the many faces of the goddess can help us along this journey. She is in you, and you are in she. So we have some themes to contemplate. In the story of Sophia, we see that she is quite innocent in her love for the divine. There's a naivete to her story where she misconstrues the light, takes a blind leap of faith, only to be fooled and to fall into darkness. Now, we all have blind spots in our life. In fact, we're all born innocent. And it is only through life experiences that innocence fades. But it doesn't happen all at once, typically. So there's a process here, and it's not a straight line or a straight path. It is a spiral path. And while experiencing life, we move forward thinking that we have learned something, and we make choices, often to be shocked about the blind spot that we didn't see. And often, we think we know something when we really don't, because our blind spot is darkening the truth just behind it. We become ignorant of what's really going on around us. And there are, as Sophia demonstrates, tricks of perception and inversions of what is true. Sometimes we look at a thing thinking it's one thing, but it's really another. Sophia describes her disconnection from her wholeness. And when she fell into this underworld, she was confused. There was a lot of chaos going around, and she was pulled right into it. She became disconnected. Violation of the feminine, the violation of Sophia, and the using and abusing of her innocence and her formlessness turning into form through their abusive actions. So there was a great exploitation of the feminine. And there were a lot of negative consequences. She had to deal with the fact that she was the mother of these evil dudes, and she was changed by these experiences in a variety of ways. Her story is one of triumph, one of breaking out of the wrongdoings and the irresponsibilities into a harmonious place. But she was motivated by her pain and her suffering. She was motivated by the lack of light and the darkness that she was in. She had a vague knowing that there was something more to her than this material realm of pain and suffering and joys and, the circle game that we experience from day to day. And that was a motivation for her to reunify, to become whole by finding a sacred masculine energy. And without him, her life is a struggle. So she rediscovers her spiritual nature, recognizing the transcendent unity, the spiritual union of feminine with masculine. So like Sophia, we all become lost and we drift off course. And no matter what your hardship, the goddess archetype is here to assist you in your healing and transmutation. There is an archetype to represent your best as well as your darkest self. There are 3 or more ways we can look at these archetypes and what they represent. 1, the elemental presences in the universe, the powers within the wind, the ocean, the fire, the earth. Also, the inner qualities of consciousness, the powers and qualities of your higher self, generosity, patience, fearlessness, humility, vigor, compassion, inner steadfastness, love. Or your lowest self, hoarding, being untrustworthy, jealousy, revengeful, narcissistic, fearful, irresolute, despairing, like unbending, despairing, despondent, empty, apathetic. And then these archetypes and these goddess images can also reference specific aspects of the mind. For example, the Vedic goddess Saraswati has been depicted to represent the balanced right and left brain hemispheres. Some of the god and goddess mythology has been very dramatized and sensationalized anecdotes of our actual descendants and reflections of actual history and folk practices. They can be teachers. They can teach us about what's right and wrong. They can teach us about what could happen if we continue to engage in hurtful, violent behaviors. They are guides as well to the process of our personal transformation. Deepak Chopra said, human beings aren't a thing, but a process. So we must keep in mind that our lives are a process. The feminine is about process. Archetypes, he said, are born of the collective soul, enacted by individual souls. Archetypes are life models, images, and ideals that guide the direction of your life toward the soul's ultimate destiny. Each person is hardwired to enact or model archetypal characteristics. It's an interesting thought. In a way, we are fractals of the whole. In the story of Sophia, there's a part where she also has some compassion for the earthly figures below, and she takes parts of herself and she gives them to every human on earth so that they can have this knowingness of spirit within them, so that they, on their journey and their search, find it and know their origins. Joseph Campbell's hero's journey must be at least referenced. He depicts a circle where there's a call to adventure and some supernatural aid. There's a threshold with guardians there holding a gate. And when we go through that gate, we enter the underworld and the unknown. Often there's a helper or a mentor along the way, but there are definitely challenges and temptations, often leading us to a crisis in the abyss, a death, and then a rebirth through a revelation with a transformation and some atonement or recognition of where we were off course, of where we sinned, of where we were wrong. And then we reach the next threshold of return. And there's something he calls the gift of the goddess. The journey shows the transition from the realm of the known to the unknown and back to the known. transformed. The hero receives a gift from the goddess or a high-level woman, such as a queen, a princess, a priestess, or a goddess. With this gift, the hero returns enlightened and a different person, ready for more adventures. So some journeys are long and laborious, broken up into multiple acts or thresholds, and other journeys follow a simpler path, but all of us have journeys. Over a decade ago, a priestess friend said to me something like this: figure out what myths you're living and then change the ending. I didn't know what myths I was living at the time, but I held on to this advice thinking it was wise. And I want to say thank you to Graal Corsini, director of the Goddess Temple of Ashland, for being one of those goddesses that gave me a gift at the threshold of my awakening. 3 stages of transmutation that we'll be highlighting: descension, integration, and ascension. The descensions can include innocence, naivete, and ignorance, such as we saw with Sophia. This can be compounded through trauma, or what I'm calling descension into the underworld by abduction. We'll explore the story of Persephone and Demeter to demonstrate that. And then we see the story of Inanna in Ereshkigal, where she enters the underworld by conscious choice to do her self-work. And finally, we'll explore the story of Isis and Osiris, where Isis enters the underworld out of love and expands the love for her divine, sacred, masculine partner for the love of the world. And she provides service to others in their journeys into the underworld. This is the descension through agape. There's feminine symbolism in the Kabbalah, which I'm just beginning to learn. This is some quotes from an article by Dovber Pinson called "What is Kabbalah? A Basic Introduction to the Kabbalah." He says, the Kabbalah is more about losing ourselves than about finding, becoming more other-centered and less ego-centered. The literal translation of the word Kabbalah is that which is received. To receive, we must be receptive. This is a feminine quality. We must open ourselves, creating a vessel in which to absorb that which we wish to understand or grasp, and in turn become part of the Kabbalah, the tree of life. To open the self to a higher reality, to view the spirit within the matter, to raise our consciousness to the point where our perception of reality is completely changed and the divine within all creation is revealed. The tree of life symbolizes God flowing down to man and a way for humankind to reach back up. This path is called the lightning flash. The symbolic use of the lightning flash on the tree of life has also been called the flaming sword. In order to know the full knowledge of God, one must work through this lightning. In the same way, the lightning flash moves through the air and is believed to clean and purify the air. It is believed to move through humans in order to clean and purify the heart. So here's another way of looking at the entrance way to the divine mystery, the V. The letter V corresponds to Vav or Fav in the Hebrew alphabet, meaning a peg or nail. It is the link connecting the human and the divine. V also symbolizes the vulva of a woman. Spiritually, the eye is the symbol of spiritual insight that guides us toward the path of enlightenment. So the eye, the spiritual insight, is in between the shape of the V. The third eye, the pineal gland, by awakening this gland, our body is filled with light, which allows us to enter into the realm of flight, the world of the unseen, the unknown, the darkness, the mystery. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Matthew 6:22. At the base of this, one might see a death, or base consciousness, or unconsciousness, the blind spot, and the not knowing. And that brings us to Shila Nagi. Shila Nagis are stone carvings of naked women with exaggerated vulvas, which open into a circle of darkness. They are often seen as Celtic fertility symbols and a symbol of survival of a people. She represents the entrance to the unknown, the mystery to the potential, a gateway to life and death. This is the place of transformation and the creation of new life. Here's an interesting model of an Ankh showing its correspondence to, again, the feminine reproductive organs, the entranceway into the womb. So the feminine is associated with cycles of birth and death and rebirth throughout time. Here are some more symbols of fertility. There's Ostara. Ostara eggs are a symbol of the ancient Germanic goddess Ostara, who presided over fertility and rebirth. And then there's Palkana. And it is really vital to the perpetuation of our species to recognize that this is a very sacred gift. And this is something to protect. The feminine is associated with cycles, rhythms, and seasons. Pagans regarded death as a phase of a non-linear transformation process. Death is the ultimate transformation and a natural and unavoidable part of the turning of the wheel. The darkness or the underworld is associated with the fall month and the holiday of Samhain. Generator, organizer, destroyer, and rebirther, maiden, mother, mage, and crone, the seasons of nature, the seasons of life, the phases of the moon. We must tend the fire of life. It's really vital to keep the fire of spirit and life burning. With this, we see the goddess Hestia or Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, the home, and the family. She brings in the fire element of cleansing and purification, the fire of spirit, spiritual power. Home is implied to be the center of that spiritual fire. Here's Hebe, goddess of youth. She represents our excitement and spirit to live life and search for the Holy Grail. This is a quote by Elizabeth Seraphine from The Priestess Path. Instinctively, we know something needs to be found. Often when we're young, we search outside of ourselves, looking to others, to lovers, to far-off lands for the answers to life's mysteries, only to return to ourselves over and over again. Until this quest goes on, until there is nowhere else to turn but within, to honor and claim the holy vessel that you are. And one day we realize we are a vessel that can be filled with the golden light from within. The quest for the Holy Grail, the sacred vessel that held the blood of Christ, can be likened to the quest to fill our own sacred vessel with light. As the legend goes, when the Grail is lost, the kingdom falls into ruin, desolate and bleak, a wasteland. Only the return of the Holy Grail will heal the sick land and restore the king and the kingdom to life again. To fill the cup is akin to the fulfillment of the divine feminine, or her return to wholeness and her gift to humanity. We seek to fill our cup through life experiences. We fill it with a myriad of emotional expressions. Through living life authentically, embracing and expressing ourselves emotionally, we revive the colorful tapestry of our true state, remembering the spiritual tools of our ancestry and unifying our splintered parts. The maiden Estrella, virgin goddess of justice, innocence, purity, and precision, referred to as the star goddess or star maiden, she represented all that was good in the world. Later on, though, she symbolized the fall of humanity and the hope that a new age of innocence would one day return. And this brings us to our second story, that of Persephone and Demeter, descent by abduction and human-made trauma. Zeus gave secret permission to Hades, the god of the underworld, to take Persephone. However, neither Persephone nor Demeter had any awareness of this, nor did they give their consent. One day, Persephone is in a meadow communing with some flowers, with some nymph friends of hers, when all of a sudden, out of the ground comes a chariot of black horses driven by Hades. Shocked and afraid, she doesn't have time to run before Hades grabs her and starts dragging her down into the underworld. The girl screams loudly for help. Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, and Helios, god of sun, hear her cries, but do nothing. Her mother, Demeter, also hears her screams, but she's too far away to do anything about it. Demeter is terrified. She asks for help, but nobody can tell her. And she's angry, and she's distressed and distraught, and she cries and wails, and she becomes angry, wandering over the earth with torches in her hand, looking for Persephone. She doesn't eat, she doesn't bathe, and so the earth begins to dry up. Demeter decides to go ask Helios, the sun god, since he's up in the sky all day and he basically sees everything. Helios ends up telling Demeter the whole situation. The sun god actually tries to let Demeter know that she should leave matters well enough alone. She should be passive, that Hades will be a good husband to her. And he's an important and powerful deity. Don't get him mad. Well, Demeter doesn't care about that. She's more sad than before, and she's furious with Zeus, and she vows that she will not set foot on Mount Olympus, and that she will not let anything grow on earth until she sets eyes on her daughter again. As a result, a terrible famine assaults the earth, and people are starving everywhere. It's spreading around the whole world, bringing misery to everyone. Seeing this, Zeus sends Hermes, the messenger god, down to the underworld to order Hades to let Persephone go. Hades slips some pomegranate seeds into Persephone's mouth and tricks her into eating them. Hermes and Persephone then fly out of the land of the dead and greet Demeter, who is so happy to see her, but immediately recognizes that something could be wrong and asks Persephone if she ate anything while in the underworld. And it turns out that if you eat something while you're down there, you generally have to stay there forever. And it's said that the pomegranate seed is the fruit of the underworld. And every time someone eats it, even a few seeds, then after a while, they miss the underworld and they want to go back. They yearn to go back. So Persephone reveals that Hades tricked her into eating these seeds, and Demeter is completely in despair and anger and rage, and she says that nothing will ever grow on earth again. And just then Hecate shows up and a deal is brokered, and it's decided that Persephone only has to go spend part of the year in the underworld, so that the people of the land do not starve. They convince Demeter to allow the plants to grow and the flowers to fruit. And she reluctantly agrees with this, but says that when Persephone is in the underworld, nothing on earth will grow. And I wonder in this story if eating the pomegranate seeds also implies a certain sexual union, a breaking of innocence, a breaking of the hymen and the blood, which can then create a bond with a young girl, a young woman, and is devoted and dedicated to their abuser, creating like a trauma bond where her abuser becomes her savior in a sense. And so she becomes willing to go to the underworld, willing to engage in this relationship. And certainly this has happened many, 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 many countless of times throughout humanity. There's so many traumatic events in the mythology of the gods and goddesses. Hera was raped by her brother and later husband Zeus. Hora raped by Dionysus while she was drunk. Demeter raped by her brother Poseidon in the form of a horse when she was trying to escape from him. Europa abducted by Zeus in the form of a white bull, then raped, resulting in the birth of Minos. Medusa, raped by Poseidon, Cyrene, raped by Apollo in the form of a wolf. There's a poem that I want to read. It is called The Way It Is by William Stafford. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. And I see this as the thread of principle that will help keep us on a path of truth and right action. And the more of us that do that, the freer we become. So the Norns weave the webs of time, and the Norns are central to understanding natural law, because the Norns weave the thread that we can follow that will help us to understand the principles of cause and effect. So we're going to talk about some stories from the Greek and Roman tradition that really, from my point of view, are highlighting to us the cause and effect of violence and violating natural law. We start with Hera. Hera was the queen of the gods and the goddess of marriage, family, childbirth, and women in the Greek pantheon. She was the wife and sister of Zeus, originally raped by Zeus. Hera was known for being a goddess of marriage and birth, but she was also known to be jealous and vengeful toward her husband's many lovers and their many children. Many of her most famous myths center around her jealous retributions to Zeus's infidelity. Zeus was a real playboy and very disrespectful of Hera's feelings. And there are so many stories of him having relations with other women, both goddess and mortal, and Hera seeking violent revenge with murderous and treacherous retribution. Hera had many powers, including mind control, driving people insane, altering the weather, shape-shifting, and turning people on Earth into animals or even monsters. Zeus and Hera remind me of Bill and Hillary, and it's a reminder to me, the similarity of how myths are recreated, and that by studying the myths, we can start to see these myths playing out in real life in our world. And we can see how we are repeating patterns and staying stuck at the bottom of the trough, at the bottom of the cup. So there's so many tragedies, and here is some stories of connected figures, the tragedies of Hera, Leto, Artemis, and Apollo, and Niobe and all her children. So basically, Leto, the goddess of motherhood, childbirth, and modesty, she suffered greatly because of her relationship with Zeus, which caused Hera to be jealous. Hera then cursed Leto so that she could not find any solid ground or any island of earth to give birth to her children. Her children are Artemis and Apollo. And finally, through some kind people, she was able to find a place to bear her children. Finding a hidden island, Leto gave birth to her two children, Artemis and Apollo. Artemis, having to grow up very quickly, in fact, in like just a few minutes, having to grow up quickly under the conditions of her mother's duress, witnessed and helped midwife the harrowing birth of her brother, Apollo. Hera had placed an evil spell on Leto, making her birth especially long and difficult. The children endured many struggles along with their mother, as Leto was exiled and chronically harassed by the jealous and revengeful Hera. Artemis was so negatively impacted by witnessing her mother's experiences and the cruel acts of the gods that she vowed to remain a virgin and never marry. And there are multiple stories of her killing men who showed signs of disrespect or cruelty towards a female. She was somewhat of a vigilante. From seeing her mother suffer, she grew up wanting to protect women and their virginity and their children. She was one of the deities who could not be affected by Aphrodite's powers. The goddess could not make the hunting goddess fall in love. Her heart became so hardened and protected from the traumas of her life that she didn't allow love in. She became splintered off within herself. One particularly tragic and gruesome example involves the goddess Niobe, who had 12 children. Niobe, in a moment of cattiness, taunted Leto for only having 2 children. Angry at this insult to their mother, Apollo and Artemis took it upon themselves to kill all Niobe's children in revenge. Apollo killed her 6 sons, and Artemis killed her 6 daughters. Niobe was transformed into a stone, where she brooded over her sorrows. Her heart hardened. And so the wheel of pain continues turning. The circle of hurt expands and multiplies. One wrong leads often to many more. In the myths, we can see these extremes of the female nature, the women under stress, women under duress and pain, and the trauma of the Greek and Roman Empire, marked by many, many wars, bloodshed, slavery, division, ultimately leading to the collapse of both civilizations. And there is a rippling effect of all of that violence when we look at these stories of women, including some very ugly ones. And I bring this up because I think it's very convenient to focus on the positive aspects of the feminine or romanticized version, and bypass the acknowledgement of women's participation in the evil. And just to remind you that women can be very evil, here are examples. Elizabeth Bathory captured, tortured, and killed countless peasants and servants over the course of several decades. Historians estimate she murdered hundreds of infants as well during her lifetime as a baby farmer. Queen Ranavalona ruled the island of Madagascar from 1828 to 1861, and during that time she murdered more than half of her citizens. So the sickness exists, and it is a thread weaving through the reality of our world. The corruption of the goddess is shown through the mythology. Women under stress, such as Pandora, she opened the box and unleashed evil in the world. Kakya, the Greek goddess of vice and moral badness. Lamia, grief-stricken and insane, Lamia began stealing and eating other women's children. Her actions caused her to turn into a literal monster. Eris, the Greek goddess of discord, who revels in sowing discord among gods and mortals alike. And Nemesis, the goddess of indignation against and retribution for evil deeds and undeserved good fortune. Women under stress, women reacting to trauma by creating more trauma. And that is the circle. One person acts out of their unprocessed and unmanaged emotion, not taking responsibility for themselves, and does an evil act, which then has a rippling effect to the people around them that causes real damage that then they perpetuate through their own actions, through their own wounding. And unless people do what we're calling the inner work, which is the work of the underworld, inside ourselves, the world of emotion, the world will continue to repeat these patterns. Wrongdoings create wrong, create hurt and mental suffering. And so we have the goddess of mental suffering, Oasis, the Greek goddess that personifies the spirit of misery, anxiety, grief, suffering, and depression. Her Roman name is Miseria. Algae were the personified spirits of pain and suffering, body and mind, grief, sorrow, and distress. They were the bringers of weeping and tears. The algae were related to Oasis, the milder spirit of misery and sadness, and Penthos, the god of mourning and lamentation. Their opposite, Melino, from the Greek, the daughter of Persephone and Hades. She is a nymph of nightmares and madness. Eris, the Greek goddess of discord and strife. Discord is her Roman name. She's the daughter of Zeus and Hera. She is known for causing small arguments to become more serious events, including war. She's also known for being insatiable for chaos and mayhem. The opposite goddess is Harmonia, or Concordia for the Romans. War and death. The Morgan in ancient Irish mythology was a triple goddess, also known as the Phantom Queen. She would often appear before a battle in the form of a large raven. Enu, goddess of war, fierce. And then the Keres were female spirits or daemons of violent or cruel death, including death in battle, by accident, murder, or ravaging disease. So the feminine is seen in the evil of the world as well as the good. After a while, the spirit of Kali will rise. Kali, the blood drinker. She is the frenzied, battle-maddened demon slayer who comes into the world at moments when dark forces or demons threaten civilization, and especially the feminine. She appeared out of Durga's eye when her extra force was needed to defeat the demons, Chanda and Munda. She's like the heavy artillery. Later in battle, Kali confronts the demon chief, who has a magical power. When drops of his blood spill, they turn into warriors. Kali, with her long tongue, licks up his blood before it can touch the ground. So she is a mitigator of evil. She's fierce. Remember the goddess's dual nature as both the force that binds us and the force that sets us free. Her sword is the force that slices through delusion, ignorance, false hope, and lies. Things have gotten turned upside down. The Hanged Man card. It's time to walk through the fire and burning out what is not us. Here we have a couple of fire goddesses to help us. The shadow work involves dying to self in order to find your true self, which already exists within you. Like our spiraling hips, we are called to keep churning up our emotional energy and compost it, creating an alchemical process of transformation in ourselves and our world. When we come to another story, we're starting to recognize that there's something more going on inside us, that we are tired of this perpetual cycle of pain. And we recognize that we are carrying a heavy burden inside of us, and it must be dealt with. And this brings us to the story of Inanna and Ereshkigal. I'm going to read the story that is represented in an article called Inanna and Ereshkigal, an ancient myth for the modern times, a lecture by Sue Gebhardt, transcribed. The thing about Inanna that is significant from my point of view in this talk is that she enters the underworld consciously. And in fact, she demands entrance because none of us want to do this. It's uncomfortable. It's so much easier to ignore the pain than to face it and the tragedies and the grief associated. But yet, Inanna, goddess of heaven and earth, great warrior, lover, creator of poetry and song, decides to go visit her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. Before she begins the descent, Inanna instructs her faithful handmaid, Ninshubur, to raise the alarm if she hasn't resumed after 3 days. Inanna arrives at the first gate of the underworld and demands to enter. The gatekeeper goes to consult with Ereshkigal. When the queen of the underworld hears this, she is furious. She slaps her thigh and bites her lip and takes the matter into her heart. She finally agrees to see Inanna, but Inanna must be brought to her naked and bowed low. Inanna has to pass through 7 gates to get to Ereshkigal's palace. At each gate, she is forced to remove a piece of her regalia. When Inanna objects, she is told the ways of the underworld are perfect and they may not be questioned. Finally, she comes before Ereshkigal naked and bowed low. Ereshkigal fastens upon her the eye of death. She strikes her, and Inanna is turned into a corpse and is hung from a hook on the wall, a piece of green rotting meat. When Inanna does not return after 3 days and nights, Ninshubur sets up a lament and beats the drums. She goes to 2 of the sky gods and begs for their help. They refuse, saying Inanna was asking for trouble and she deserves all she gets. Then Ninshubur goes to Enki, the god of water and wisdom. He takes pity on Inanna, and from the dirt under his fingernails, he creates two little creatures that are able to fly through the cracks down to Ereshkigal in the underworld. Now, Ereshkigal is busy. She's busy with either mourning the death of her consort or giving birth. She's moaning and wailing in her pain. The little creatures sit with her and they mirror her pain. "Oh, my poor heart," she wails. "Oh, your poor heart," they commiserate. "Oh, my poor belly," she cries. "Oh, your poor belly," they cry with her, and so on and on. Finally, Ereshkigal stops. She looks at them and says, "Why are you moaning with me?" She asks, and then, "I like you. I will give you a gift." The creatures ask for Inanna's body. Ereshkigal agrees, and they take Inanna and restore her to life. But before she ascends to the upper world again, the judges of the underworld demand that she send a replacement. Inanna agrees to do this, and as she ascends, at each of the 7 gates, she puts on her royal robes. When she returns to the upper world, she finds everyone in mourning for her, except for her husband, Dumuzi, who's sitting on her throne, eating and drinking and making merry. Inanna fixes upon him the eye of death and decrees that he shall be her replacement in the underworld. He is terrified and tries to flee, but he is pursued by the fierce Ghana from the underworld. He begs for help. Dumuzi's sister, Geshtinana, who loves her brother so dearly, goes to Inanna and offers to take his place in the underworld. And finally, Inanna decides that they shall each spend half the year there. When one returns after 6 months, the other must make the descent. So let's look at a few of the things in this cool story. So Inanna has come to a point where she recognizes that she has some pain to deal with. She pretty much has to demand entrance down to Ereshkigal, who doesn't want to let her in. And we could think of all the characters as being part of her, and that Ereshkigal is her own splintered off part that is dealing with her trauma and pain inside her. And that part is protected and doesn't want to open itself up to the grief. But Inanna knows in her wisdom that if she doesn't process this pain and deal with it directly and feel it, that she will only incur negative consequences in her life. She will lose her powers. And so she has to use a lot of willpower and courage in order to go into the underworld. And clearly we see why, because it's very scary. She became numb and frozen and unable to pull herself out by herself. But because she knew that this was scary business, she made sure that her witness self was paying attention. So the part of herself that is like the handmaiden represents is her witness, and that which keeps her feet on in her identity outside of the underworld. And then the people in the community, when asked for help, a lot of them turned a blind eye. They said, she's done a lot of bad stuff. She has a lot of weight in her heart. It's her own deal. I'm not going to help her, which is a sad reality. And so Enki, who is a wise god in this story, the god of water, feminine symbol, and wisdom, allows her an opportunity to become free. And he takes the dirt from under his fingernails to create these 2 little creatures that basically represent the empathy. They represent the mirroring her pain, mirroring the emotional pain is very powerful for healing. And their commiseration just softened Ereshkigal just enough to let Inanna go, to release her, transformed. Now, what was it about the dirt under the fingernail? I think that It represents earth and grounding. It's the power of being grounded as a human, of being reminded about the value of life itself. And earth is able to be healing to her in this way and to provide her with a reflection so that she could feel seen and not so alone, not so isolated. After her mourning was complete, she was able to go up transformed. And so when she got up, she saw her husband differently. She saw his narcissism and she saw his sister's codependency. And she's like, you guys need to go do some shadow work, and sent them down. Inanna's descent was by conscious choice. She was prepared and had forethought. She kept a guard or witness. She willingly stripped off her clothes and power symbols. She stepped away from her earthly identity to enter the halls of the underworld to face the unpredictable and raging emotions of her sister, the queen of the underworld. Removing her garments is taking off our roles and identities in our earthly life. It is stripping down to be like a child, to open up to the wounds of the child within, without all of our defenses blocking us from getting to her. The more atrocities and separation, the more garb you need to cover up the vulnerability underneath. The more intentional and demanding you must be to go into the underworld of yourself. Your layers of protection will resist. They will numb you from feeling the enormity of your accumulated pain. And your veils will trick you that everything is fine as you are, but don't be fooled. There's work to be done inside, and there's consequences if you don't do it. And being a queen is heavy work, and we are all ultimately our own queen or king, and this is our work. Being your own witness, it's very essential so that you don't drown in the pain of the emotional water. There are helpers along the way, such as Kali, the great destroyer, the goddess of revolution. For the really serious shit, she's the one that pops out of Durga's eye to help you out, to slay the demons, because it comes from love. And then Hel, or Hela, she presides over the underworld realm where she receives a portion of the dead. She's also a loving, nurturing mother who shows us our darkest shadow self while holding us from falling over the edge of destruction. When we feel like we can't handle the pain a second more, she's there with her dark arms wrapped around us, showing us ourselves. She's holding us there so that we don't disintegrate while we're clearing away the suffering. Be not afraid to enter into the depths of darkness, but caution, prepare yourself. The journey is not for the unprepared. The feminine in her dark form is daunting and very powerful. It is best to do some preparation for your journey, for she holds all of your unfinished pain. And beneath the surface, like the frozen waters of a glacier, of an iceberg, there's so much that we don't see, that we stuff down below: the frustrations, the anger, the worry, the rage, the hatreds, the jealousies, the guilt, the insecurity, the powerlessness. These are the emotions that when we spiral in them without transmuting them, keep us very heavy and in suffering. And it is through the process of going into the cave of the underworld, into the womb of our transformative psychological process, that we can move this spiral, get this heavy waters of the deep ocean turning and moving in the other direction, upwards towards positive experiences and positive feelings. It is a spiral path. Nate Cap, in his funnel presentation 2023, quoted, "The spiral is the bridge from the circle to the dot." And we need a bridge to rise. And it is this spiraling motion that helps us to move the heaviness of our emotions, our heavy, dark emotions. Spiral, related to the word spirit, animating or vital principle in men and animals. Breath, breath of God. Hence inspiration, breath of life, hence life. So we see the connections in these words. And Sophia is a soul's journey. Soul, a substantial entity believed to be that in each person which lives, feels, thinks, and wills. The spiritual and emotional part of a person, sometimes said to mean coming from or belonging to the sea, because that was supposed to be the stopping place of the soul before birth and after death. So we have all these associations with the feminine related to the soul, the spiral path, and spirituality, and the water, the ocean or sea. The feminine way of circular movement, assisted by the masculine focus, the point, the goal, the purpose, the linear influence. A circle becomes a spiral. We spiral towards our goal, spiral up or down the pole, circles versus lines. It's not a linear path. It's a spiral path, and it's the aim of the masculine that creates organization or structure for the feminine energy and assists the feminine to progress back upwards into pure spirit. The spiral energy creates life. It moves us. It is the power of emotion. The deep ocean waters move in a spiraling motion, deep and heavy and powerful, living waters. We can learn to ride upon her waves as a way of mastering the deep. There is cause for thoughtfulness and perhaps even caution for the unleashed powers of intense emotion. But do not be frightened of your own feminine power. Instead, honor her within you. Look at her with compassion as she returns that compassionate gaze. Check the force of pressure that you have dammed up inside you. See her. Take time to go inward and see her. Find ways to compassionately release the waters of fear and grief and longing. Embrace misery as she sheds her tears. Feel the cord of grief that connects us. Allow her to transmute your pain. Connect with the compassion of the green Tara and feel the deep love of Venus. Trust the transformative power of Kali. Visit the halls of Ma'at to remember the core wisdom of truth and natural law, and seek the wisdom of the crone for your personal healing. The inner standing of your emotions is through your body, through the deep, dark cavern, this watery place of your soul, of your emotional body. Victor Schauberger, he says that the water is the blood of Mother Earth. In Greek mythology, the algae are the personification of sorrow and the bringers of weeping and tears. They were daughters of the goddess of strife Eris and had many siblings. The algae were related to Oisis, the spirit of misery and sadness, and Penthos, the god of mourning and lamentation. We invite the weeping, for her release will awaken the frozen waters within us. Connecting, weeping together, we generate power to heal the buried pain of our communities. We know we are connected by our shared grief. Moving our grief opens space to feel all of our feelings and experience a renewed love for life, and to awaken the sleeping giants of inner wisdom. Sing, wail, weep, yell, allow her to be released. Allow the weeping to come naturally and gradually, but allow the weeping. And here we highlight some goddesses that represent this weeping. Sal, the goddess who cries frequently in folk songs. She cries in the face of injustice, and when a grass snake is harmed, her tears turn to amber as a reminder. Goddess Freya cries tears of red gold for her husband, the god Or, who is frequently absent. Niobe, the goddess whose neck is wet with tears below her weeping eyes. And we can cry for them. We can cry for her. Grieving and releasing our tears is part of this healing work. Unexpressed tears do not go away. Their sadness resides in our bodies and souls. They are an outward expression of inner pain. Demeter, Isis, and Inanna, their stories all progress with them crying and wailing in their grief and their suffering, indicating a power to their tears. The expression of emotions, the water element, has a power of transformation. It can bring you help. It generates empathy or the power of emotion in others. And unified, this power can affect big change. Emotion moves matter. And yet passion unregulated can be dangerous too, and needs the masculine element of containment and direction. We can see the power of crying, of tears, of grieving. Women have traditionally been expressors of grief. And there's a tradition in Ireland called keening, where women cry together publicly or at wakes, expressing the deep hurts of the world through their soulful wailing. The power of the feminine includes accessing the power of emotional expression. This helps transmute our suffering. Keens are said to have contained raw, unearthly emotion, spontaneous word, repeated motifs, crying, and elements of song. This is the foundation of empathy. And this awakening of emotion by mass through the feminine expression can be very, very powerful and life-changing. And interestingly, in Egypt, at funerals, there is a theatrical element where they have two women acting out the roles of Isis and Nephthys, and they are paid, I guess, professional grievers, and it takes this vibrational energy to sort of crack open the walls. They're like the dirt under the fingernail that gets through the cracks and touches the hearts of people who are very closed off. The Valkyries notice and reward the courageous. They pick up the bravest and of the wounded or dying soldiers, and they take them to Valhalla, where they recuperate and are celebrated. Then they fly back and forth between the bloody battlefield and Valhalla, land of plenty and ripe abundance. They're on alert. They have ongoing discernment, but more than importantly, they reward courage. And going into the underworld journey to heal ourselves is an act of courage, and it is analogous to the bloody battlefield, especially in our world. So Durga, the warrior, cosmic protector, and empowering mother with 6 arms filled with sacred objects and weapons. And Parvati, the goddess of the sacred marriage, the divine yogini who embodies the power of creative will. Kali also represents the holding of strong boundaries and the use of the powerful word no. She confirms that force is sometimes necessary. For something new to be born, old structures must be destroyed, whether in nature or in society or in our personal life. She guides us to the actions and the behaviors that need changing. Because if we come up from this underworld work and we have not changed, then we have not done the work properly. But the feeling and the facing creates an integration where our splintered parts become unified. And from that place, then we can discern and decide what changes need to be made in our life. So now our final story, big story, the story of Isis, the goddess of the underworld. She represents the descent through the power of love and service. Isis, in her wholeness, helped restore the broken masculine. She recognizes women as midwives of birth and death, of healing. She's a guide for others' underworld journeys. She shows us the power of tears, the power of empathy, the power of love and service. She is the priestess and the healer. In this story, Osiris is murdered by his brother Set and cut him into 14 pieces and spread those around Egypt. With Osiris dead, Set became king of Egypt, with his sister Nephthys as his wife. Isis, in her anguish, she cried and wept and wailed. And Nephthys, her sister-in-law, felt sorry for her, and seeing Isis weeping endlessly over the loss of her husband, Isis, who has great magical powers, decided to find her husband and bring him back to life long enough so that they could conceive a child. And Isis, with the help of Nephthys, transformed into a bird and roamed the country, collecting the pieces of his torn apart body. She recovers 13 of the pieces, all but his penis. And this is obviously an important part to complete her mission of bearing a child. So she creates a new phallus for him. She uses her magic powers to reassemble the parts of his body and make Osiris whole again. She breathed the breath of life into his body and resurrected him. Once resurrected, they consummate their union and she conceives Horus. She hides in the papyrus thickets of Egypt's delta to hide the knowledge of her pregnancy and to give birth to him. She feared that Set would kill Horus to prevent him from ascending to the throne. Osiris becomes a mummy, bandaged and neither living nor dead. He becomes the ruler of the underworld and grants people life after death. Isis becomes queen of the underworld and dedicates her life to helping others come back out from the underworld. And Horus one day becomes king. So this is a story of love. It is a story of valuing the sacred masculine. It is about recognizing that we're in this together. And it shows that the divine feminine has a healing influence on the masculine. And she represents agape, the love of all humanity and the valuing of all people. And it's really reflects the value of family, of home, of hearth, and of children, and the Trinity that creates life. She's the high priestess, the guardian of the unconscious, and beckons the traveler to the world within. She represents the contemplative study of your inner world, as well as nature and spiritual mystery. The high priestess location between the two pillars suggests that it is her responsibility to mediate between the depths of reality. She is the third pillar, the path between. Knowledge is to be learned from both worlds. The nighttime scene suggests that the world she protects and guards is one that may seem frightening, but she has the potential to lead us safely into the underworld and back, resulting in the growth of the soul. She breathes new life into those who do their shadow work, a spiritual journey into the underworld to become transformed. She can represent the friend that sits with you when you're grieving, the therapist or counselor, the mother who holds you when you cry, or father. She is the midwife of our journey of healing, and her presence can be internal as well. You can draw upon her energy, the archetype within yourself, and be your own high priestess as you go in and do your own shadow work. And here we see another figure related to the water and who helps to empower her masculine counterpart, the Lady of the Lake. And Vivian, Lady of the Lake, appears to be based on older Celtic goddesses associated with water, such as Curidwen, who possessed a magic cauldron or kettle. She made a brew with herbs and water that would grant wisdom to whoever drank it. According to legend, Vivian lived in a castle beneath a lake surrounding the mystical island of Avalon. She raised Lancelot and gave Arthur the magical sword Excalibur, which he treasured. When Arthur was near death, she saved him by taking him to Avalon. She lives underwater in a hidden realm, causing her to be a symbol of mystery and magic. So now we're looking at the forces that help us to heal, the forces that help us to ascend and to embody ourselves fully, and ultimately to recognize our value as a spirit. Brigitte or Breed was a goddess who kept watch over a well or many wells from which a prospective king had to drink in order to receive his place on the throne. The well and lake are symbols of our inner world. The feminine is most present in relationships, both our relationship to ourselves and with others. Ironically, it is in loving that we experience our greatest heartache and disillusionment. It is usually something that occurs in the context of relationships that sends us spiraling into the underworld. So the real journey involves a dynamic dance between joy and pain, and the masculine and the feminine. One woman's story is an echo of every woman's story, each uniquely formed by the energies of nature and the thread of cause and effects that impact them in their lives throughout their lifetimes and encoded in our DNA. The gods and goddesses are more than interesting objects from stories. They represent our ancestry, potentially, our potentials for expansion and growth, and our paths to downfall. They also give us clues to the way back up, the journey of ascension back to our wholeness, arriving transformed and embodied with wisdom and knowledge of who we really are. Their stories give accounts of how the feminine can become separated from herself and from the masculine, and the myriad of consequences to this separation. It's not all rainbows and sunshine, to say the least. The feminine was under attack, and the resulting confusion and chaos within the female heart has been devastating. We see the effects of societal violence, destruction, chaos, and confusion. We see the defenses in people grow stronger from their pain and the many splintering off of goddess identities in the world. It seems as though every goddess at some point has the label, and she's also a war goddess added on to her. The goddesses exhibit a quite distinct separation in their personas, and we have forgotten, I would think, as women, the potential of our own self. And we can be reminded sometimes looking at them. It's not just the feminine that has been attacked, but the masculine as well. When the feminine is not well, the masculine cannot be well. And when the masculine is not well, how the female responds is of great importance. We could see from Demeter that she had more power over the crops than did Helios, the sun. She was able to turn the world dark despite him. He needed her power in order for the sun to really shine upon the crops and grow the food. Worst of all, the spiral tumble into hell has turned men against men, women against men, men against women, and women against women. Who suffered the most in this hostility, chaos, and confusion? There's no human untouched by the oppression and trauma of history and the current day chaos and evil that has grown from it. And yet, who really suffers the most from this hostility? It is the children, who have been largely forgotten as the sacred beings that they are. And again, the children represent the feminine. They are innocent. Ultimately, we are to discover that we are each multifaceted beings with both the potential for great suffering, the downward fall, or great triumph, the upward journey. And that ultimately we can realize the God and goddess within each of us and return to source in wholeness. First, we are compelled to be honest with ourselves about the many ways we have, as well as our ancestors have, contributed to the destruction of good. Healing, integration, and ascension. We can turn to the crone for her wisdom, and we can look to the tools and the elements and companions of the goddess to understand even more deeply the power of the feminine, for she is the earth, she is nature. We have fire, water, earth, and air, and all sorts of animal companions, tigers, lions, snakes, birds, cows, horses, dogs, and cats, you name it. Sacred objects like cups, wells, swords, bow and arrow, books, weapons, armor, jewelry, amulets, charms, headdresses, gowns, helmets, magic cloths, veils, belts, girdles, veils, daggers, feathers, talismans, so much. We have skin markings and tattoos, sacred helpers from like fairies and spirits. We have the recognition of the feminine in the earth, for we are nature. We embody wisdom, like Mother Gaia. Like her, we are resilient and ever renewing. The goddess is in the landscape, and there are many goddesses of healing, like Ermed, also known as Ermith, Celtic goddess of the healing arts, a member of the Tuatha De Danann, the most ancient race of deities in Ireland. And just as they did, she had a great magical powers. The herbalists, the midwives, the nurses, and all this protected by Brigidi, the Celtic goddess of spring, the dawn, and the fertility. She protected mothers and children. And of course, this story, she lost her own son and was unable to protect him. Her grief, like Isis, turned into love, where she protects the hearth. She's the goddess of agriculture, watching over the livestock, goddess of music, poetry, and knowledge. She's linked to metalworking and smithery, metalsmiths. She's connected to the sun, the fire element. And she's also connected to the water, the wells and rivers, the healing waters. And of course, she's a fighter when need be. Live in your body, dance, learn martial arts, connect with your sensuality and your sexuality, garden, study plants and herbs, sing, ritual theater. These are healing. Goddess embodied, Homage to My Hips by Lucille Clifton. These hips are big hips. They need space to move around in. They don't fit into little petty places. These hips are free hips. They don't like to be held back. These hips have never been enslaved. They go where they want to go. They do what they want to do. These hips are mighty hips. These hips are magic hips. I have known them to put a spell on a man and spin him like a top. And this is a picture of another mentor of mine, Sedona Sophia, who I've learned a lot from. She is Shakti in all her forms, balanced and wise, as well as imbalanced and chaotic. She is like the dynamic and ever responsive and changing energy of the natural elements. She is in you and me, unified within herself and unified with her divine masculine counterpart. We can internalize the divine mother. And then there's Lakshmi, a goddess of abundance and good fortune. She represents the embodiment of wisdom, the skills of success, the goddess of sustainability, the preserver of life. She teaches about reciprocity, reciprocal relationships, mediator, and a balancer in families. And Freya, the Norse goddess of love, fertility, and also death and war. She's known for her ability to predict the future and teach others the art of prophecy. Just as Isis cared about the divine dance of creation, knowing that both masculine and feminine are required to consummate the birth of a new reality, so can we in our feminine energy. We can, with our feminine compassion and love and patience, help put him back together and invigorate masculine strength in our world. The feminine healer can be like the Valkyries, who acknowledge the bravest warriors and assist the recovery and transition from death to rebirth. We can fly together to a place of renewal and celebration. We can bring spirit back. And like Freya, we can also receive the slain warriors not chosen for Valhalla and assist in their healing through love, truth, and beauty. For without both forces of feminine and masculine, we do not have life itself. And to live well in this physical existence, we most definitely need each other. The last thing I want to emphasize are the goddesses of justice and sovereignty. And there are quite a few of them as well. I'm going to focus on Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice and conception. She's the goddess of balance and order. Okay. She stands for that which is straight or true. She personifies cosmic order and harmony. She is a teacher of natural law, and once we align to her principles in thought, feeling, and deed, our lives will reap the benefits of her wisdom. We will live harmonious lives. She is the mother of morality, and she is the guide to what is worthy. And this brings me to the word worship, which, as I was studying some of these goddesses and their horrible deeds, I was feeling sad and kind of appalled, actually, that these deities from the Roman and Greek pantheon are worshipped. And I want to make clear that I am not talking about worshiping goddesses. And I don't believe in worshiping anyone. So the etymology of worship, I thought would be interesting to look at. From Old English, word skip, condition of being worthy, dignity, glory, distinction, honor, and ship. What I think of dignity that we carry on our ship. What is worth carrying on our ship, our body? And what is worthy of worship are not people or gods or goddesses, but principles and qualities. And so in our study, I think it's important to recognize the qualities and the principles which bring good, that help lighten our path, that help us to ascend, and to recognize our spiritual nature, what we value, how we act, doing what's right. Is it making us light or heavy? It's hard to lift. It's hard to carry a heavy load, especially if you keep adding more weight. We need to become as light as a feather in a moral sense, in a spiritual sense, so that we can rise. Only through discipline, effort directed by wisdom and law can he rise again into the sphere of his spiritual completeness. Because of the depth of our wounds, it is sometimes hard to bear the truth of how things really are. It is easy to lose connection to the origins of our pain. These memories become occulted within us. We can look to the gods and goddesses to assist us in decoding and de-occulting our inner world through the understanding of where we came from and what we can become. They are energetic templates or portals to know thyself. Archetypes can become our mirror, our guide, our inspiration, our warnings, and our teachers. The raising of consciousness is the goal. There's a visible shift that happens when consciousness rises. Healing our hearts transforms us from stone weights to light feathers and eliminates the illusion of separation, raising us in the knowledge of unity and love.